I bet you've never thought of this. You've probably got better things to do. How many people, when they buy electrical items, actually take that bit of cardboard off? It's a good question, isn't it? I think you'd be able to sort of weed out the OCDs amongst the rest. I can't be bothered. Eventually it'll fall off, won't it? Welcome to Ralph's house. Yes, welcome back. Well, I've got quite a bit to talk about this week. A lot to get through, I must say. But I thought I'd start off, because I seem to get the most clicks on Chinese diesel heater videos, talking about, you know, how I'm getting on with it, because obviously I've gone through, we're into March now. So we're coming towards the end of winter now and into spring. And if you've been watching Ralph's house, you'll know that I fitted a Chinese diesel heater, and when you put the word Chinese in front of it, you automatically assume it's going to be below par, or at least cheap. Well, they are cheap, but they are direct copies of the German ones, and just as good, I have to say. Yeah, I've been living with it for a few months now, and at the moment, because I've got out to run my son to work on a Sunday morning, you know, he works Sundays, and the car was all iced up, that sort of stuff. But I wisely left the diesel heater on, and in fact it's been running a solid week. Usually I turn it off if the weather's, you know, reasonable, but it has been a little bit cold of late, hasn't it? Just above 0 at times at night. So I've left it on setting 1, because it goes all the way up to 6. Not only setting 1, but in alpine mode, which means the pump on the heater is not working anywhere near us. It's about half the speed, so it's just really sipping the diesel, but it keeps this house frost free, keeps it nice and warm actually upstairs. What it doesn't do is heat up the bedrooms when you shut the bedroom doors, but my son and I don't particularly like hot bedrooms. But if I do need to warm those, well, I can open the bedroom door and the heat will get in there and it'll warm up the bedroom before I go in. Or, as I have done when it's dropped really, really low, is I've put on the gas central heating, turn off the rads downstairs, because I don't need them, obviously, with the Chinese heater covering that area very well. And just turn the upstairs radiators, just turn those on and just set the thermostat at about 19. So it's just, you know, it's bearable. And just as I get to bed, I turn it off. So it's very rare that I use my gas central heating now. And in terms of running costs, Chinese diesel heater wins hands down. And the central heating in no way gets my house as hot as that thing does. So I would say that's been a raving success. You know, the only slight inconvenience is that every now and again I have to go out and get some diesel. But and I've ordered a couple of new 20-litre containers, so that if I'm out and about and I see diesel at a really good price, or I can get agricultural diesel, which is known as red diesel. You can use that in the Chinese diesel heaters. That's still allowed and under the present laws. You just can't use it on the road in a car. Right, what you're looking at actually here is my little spares box. Various sort of things in here. This is one of the seals for the burn chamber. I've got a pack of those in case they start to leak. So yeah, you do need 1 or 2 spare. Well, not to get running, you can just fire the thing up, but it's useful to have stuff, you know, like spare glow plugs and gaskets and proper pipe clips, decent ones, and you know, a tool for getting the glow plug out. Lots on YouTube about servicing these Chinese diesel heaters. They are pretty easy, to be honest. There's nothing really complicated about it. I do recommend that you filter the fuel though. You know, with all the will in the world, you never know what you're going to get through the petrol pumps, and it only takes a small particle to jam up your fuel pump. Now, the other thing about the diesel heater is it requires a 12-volt source, and that's because they were principally designed for vehicles as an overnight heater in trucks, that sort of thing. And there's a bit of a debate, but most people say you're better off using a 12-volt battery and hook a battery charger up to it. And yeah, that makes perfect sense, because if your power goes, then there is a chance that your heater suddenly shuts down at full pelt and it gets rather hot inside. You've got a circuit board in there, and potentially it could damage, although I've never actually come across anybody who's actually done that, you know. Plenty of anecdotal evidence, but otherwise no. But what I've done is I'm using a 12-volt transformer. A lot of people who run these Chinese diesel heaters use that, so it's 240 volt to 12 volt. I've actually tweaked mine. Mine's about 13 volt. A bit like the sort of rating you'd get for a CB power supply, something like that. 13, 14 volt. It'll run fine on that. I think they're tolerant actually up to about 16 volt, but I wouldn't run it that high. But obviously that's plugged into the mains, and if I did have a power cut, well, the heater's going to go off, isn't it? It doesn't get a proper shutdown procedure. So I was lucky enough in recent months to acquire a uninterruptible power supply, a UPS, commonly used for computers, you know, so that if you're in the middle of some work and the power goes, you don't lose what's on your desktop. You've got time to shut it down. And if you look at the display on the UPS, because I've got the mains going to the UPS and then out of the UPS to the 12-volt power supply. And but if you look at the display, you know, the batteries are full, but the load on it is very low. It's very good. And if I disconnect the power, the heater will continue to run because the UPS is still supplying the power supply, and that will run for several hours, quite honestly. The only power cuts I'm likely to get are very brief ones, so it covers that. And also the other good thing is having a UPS means in the summer, when I don't use the diesel heater, I can then plug my my chest freezer into it as a backup for that. Now the chest freezer draws very little. It's only about 11 watts when it's running. But I don't know about you, but I dread the potential for the chest freezer to lose power for whatever reason, and all my food ends up defrosted. And then you're stuck with a dilemma. Then you've either got to cook it and eat it there and then, which is a lot if it's a big chest freezer, or you just take the financial hit, or you claim on your insurance, whatever. But I've had it happen twice in my life, and it was a disaster, I can tell you. It cost me a lot of money, lost a lot of food in it. So during the summer I can plug my chest freezer into that. It's not so much of an issue in winter because it'll hold its temperature for a long period of time. But in summer, you know, it could defrost quite rapidly, really. You've only got an hour or so and then the temperature's dropping. So having a UPS means that, you know, the chest freezer's covered. So I just thought I'd cover that very early on in the video. You know, I know there's a lot of people out there who've got these Chinese diesel heaters. Can you run it to heat home? Yep, absolutely you can. It's just a case of changing the way you live. And of course, we're now living in a period where energy costs are extraordinarily high, and it's very hard to, and particularly if people are in rented and they're on a low income, my heart really goes out to them, especially if they've got children, because what can you do? You know, you need to keep your children warm, but you can't afford the energy bill. And that's common across the country, unfortunately. Fuel poverty's terrible. Actually, one of the worst places in the country, and you wouldn't think it, is Stratford-upon-Avon. They have terrible fuel poverty in Stratford-upon-Avon, which you would think was a fairly affluent area. But because the buildings are older, they're not particularly well insulated, so they're costing an absolute fortune to heat. That's a big problem, you know, because I used to have dealings with Stratford-upon-Avon citizens advice years ago, so I'm aware of all of this. But this is a good way of getting your energy bills down. And however you look at it, what I do like about it is the fact that I can go out, buy the fuel at the pump, and it's covered, it's paid for, isn't it? You know, unlike when you're running gas and then you just get a colossal bill coming. But roughly it's halved my heating bill. And I'm quite pleased with that. So that's how I've got on with it, and I just thought I'd go cover it before we move on to the next thing, which is an interesting collection of bits and pieces. And not these, by the way, but a good friend of mine, Paul, I won't say what industry he works in, but they fit new equipment and take out the old equipment. And he's accrued, because it all gets scrapped, you see, but he's accrued a lot of those parts, and he's very generously given me a carrier bag full of stuff and a round tub of stuff, which I thought we'd have a look at, because perhaps less interesting to women, I suppose. But I don't know about you, but if I go into somebody else's garage, my eyes wander. You always want to see what everybody else has got, don't you? And this is your opportunity, because I've not looked through this stuff either, but I think there'll be some real goodies in it. Right, coming up. And here it all is. And I think this tub here, I don't know, it had chocolates in it, I think, is mostly hardware, and we'll definitely go through it, but I want to set that aside just for a moment. But there's some interesting stuff in here. Well, apart from a bit of cable, it's quite heavy duty stuff, isn't it? Twin core stuff. That'd be useful. The reason why Paul gave me all this is because I was talking to him about the fact that I work on older arcade machines, and some parts are really difficult to get now. And one of the things that's really difficult to get is the brass or copper contacts that you find in pinball machines. They rely on them heavily, and it's an old technology. You know, people don't use those anymore. They can do it all. It's all computer controlled. But you know, he went to his garage because he said, I've got quite a lot of stuff in there. He said, I'll bring you stuff in. And I couldn't believe how much. Amazing guy, and interesting to talk to as well. But I thought we'll go through these, and I'm literally going to, this is the first time I've looked in this bag. And we'll tip out what's in it. Now, to any wives out there, they're thinking, this is junk. I don't want that in my house. Yeah, I get that. But there's some good. Ooh, now that's what I'm after. See these contacts? Can't get these anymore. They're called leaf switches, and they were sort of superseded by micro switches, and then computers, and almost down to Arduinos now. A relay, you know. I mean, what would you pay for this lot? A lot if you had to buy them. Oh, some bulbs as well. They're getting increasingly hard to find, those things. Yeah, he's got a bulb. This is going to take some sorting out, isn't it? And if you look through and think, oh, I want one of those. Yeah, I'm with you. Well, that's a contact, isn't it? I have no idea what that is. Oh, it's a push switch. Well, that's different, isn't it? Are they earbuds? Yeah, I think they are. When was the last time you saw one of those? DIN plug. Oh, I do like these switches. These are well made. I don't know who makes. A lot of this stuff would have come from RS Components, I think, over the years. Yeah, it's a push to make switch. Centre momentary pulse. Yeah, very good. Some big chunky fuses. What's that for? 400 volt? No, maybe not. Maybe 240 volt. Oh, rectifier. Don't know the value of this one. I'll have to have a look. I'll have to look at it on the RS catalogue, I suppose. 10, 40, 35, 10. Does that mean that's 10 amp or 40 amp? Probably 10 amp, I would have thought. Yeah, because often in these old arcade machines they used selenium rectifiers, and most of them have really got to the end of their life, really, and when they go, they really stink, those things. And so you normally pull those out and put in one of these, and perhaps a resistor just to drop the voltage a bit more. But That's pretty good. Ooh, that would be a lot of money to buy. I can't see you getting that under 10 or 20 quid. That's a heavy duty micro switch. Oh, I'd love a bank of those. They'd be better than leaf switches. Yeah. Gland fittings. That's for running cables in and out of boxes, if you didn't know. Some self-adhesive foam. Oh, that's interesting. I might have a use for that in my Archer pinball. They drill bits. No, it's a bridge rectifier. Converts AC to DC. Yep, more micro switches. Those that love all this sort of stuff are probably thinking, yeah, I want one of those. Oh, that's another one. Nice switch at the end of travel where something moves across and then cuts out. I would think. What on earth's that? Is that a rectifier as well? You think it would? No, it's not a rectifier. It's a relay of some sort. Don't know how that works. I will figure it out. Yeah, there's plenty of those sort of things. A few components in there. Oh, some heavy rated resistors. I do like those. Don't know what that is. I've no idea. I love all this stuff because, you know, when I'm, well, that'd be handy, wouldn't it? I'll be able to stick that on things. I might stick that on my front door. Yeah, and the relay. Another relay. Oh, this is fantastic, really. Relays, if you don't know what they are, if you've got to switch something of high current, let's say 240 volt, and you've got a 12 volt circuit, well, you'd use a relay. You'd power it up with 12 volt and that'll switch over to 240 volt, something like that. Ooh, a lock switch. That's nice. Turn the power off with a key. Very much a security key as well, I'd say. You'd have a job matching that, wouldn't you? I think lock-picking lawyer might get in there, but I'd struggle. Oh, wow. Large capacitor. Rated up to 440 volts. 220 microfarad. Yeah. And lots of fuses. More micro switches. U-bolt. Yeah. Well, I won't bore you with this one, but we'll go for the. I mean, you can see what's there, can't you? Is that another capacitor? I think it might be. Yeah. Are you excited by all this? No. That's what you're thinking. Right, I'll put all these back in the bag. Oh, a little reflector there for a bite. Ooh. If I wager right, I'd say that's probably, it's either a sort of detector or, I don't know, going to have to look it up on the RS catalogue. My first thinking was it's an alarm siren. I mean, it might be, or it could be a sensor because it's got an awful lot of wires going into it. If it's just, well, I don't know, it's got 3 wires going in. It could be an alarm sensor. It could be an alarm, yeah. I'll have to look it up. Those that know the RS catalogue will go, oh, I know what that is. Right, let's shove this all back in the bag. And I shall have a happy evening going through this lot, won't I? Right, let's have a look at the next one. No idea. This looks like tools to me. Oh, lucky to have friends like this. Let's have a look. See what we got. Oh, another key switch. Does it work? Oh, with a nice thunk on that one. Good. I presume that's so it doesn't arc. A name tag, shall I need one? I'm going to use that because actually my employer, we do use cards like this, and it's a pain in the neck getting them out of my pocket. I can actually clip my card in there. Jolly good. Oh, some nice bits. I use these a lot at work actually. That'd be a nice thing to keep in my pocket. Well, covered I suppose. And what is this? Oh, it's a wire marker tape dispenser, so you've got all the various numbers on it and you can pull them out. I guess it's for labelling up cables and wires. I would think so. All connectors in a box. Very useful. Leave that aside. Am I going to deduce what that is? Probably not. Paul's saying, you know what it is, you know what it is. No, I don't. But I'll figure it out. Colour of LEDs on a panel. 12 volt indicator. A penknife with all the various tools in it. You're not going to go wrong with that, are you? Oh, another selection of bits. Oh, that's really nice. Oh, that's lovely, that. Yeah. A key. That's probably going to relate to something else in here. A lighter. Oh, that was handy, isn't it? A clip-on light. I presume it's battery powered, is it? I don't know. I'll figure it out. Oh, it's a Rolson one. Yeah, I think I've seen these in the past. I suppose if you're working, you can just clip it on wherever you're working. Does it actually light up? No, probably need some batteries in it. Verniers and calipers. Always good. I've mentioned before in Ralph's house that if you're making or fixing or repairing anything, you definitely want some of these. You really do. You'll struggle without. Oh, magnetic name badges. Even better. And British Telecom socket. Right, so now we know what's in that one. So how shall I do this? Oh, I know. We'll just push that to one side for a minute. And we'll have a look in this tub. It saves you rummaging around in somebody else's garage, doesn't it? You can rummage around in mine. Some different bolts. I don't know what my son's going to do when I die. I suppose, you know, I'll chuck all that out. Either that or he just has an open day. You know, and people make bids on stuff. Some nice heavy duty cable there. And again. Oh, right. They're sort of add-ons for an existing power supply, I guess. A pen. Tube light. Very small one, isn't it? I don't think I've ever seen one that small. Couple of circuit boards. Don't know what they are, but I guess I could look up the numbers. I do keep a lot of these sort of things. Generally, they're buck converters, but that's got... Does that make a bleep, that end? I don't know. We'll find out. We'll find out what that is. Unless you know. Because if you know, just shout now. Oh, some big chunky connectors. They're nice. I will definitely use those. Some nice little angle brackets. Oh, this stuff's going to be so good. When you're working on this old sort of... Look at these. More of them. When you're working on this... What on earth's that? Is it a panel indicator? I suspect it might be. Springs. Springs are always good. You try and buy springs. They cost a fortune. Screws. Oh, that'd be good as a heat sink, I guess. More connectors. The boxes that just keep giving. P-clips. Or C-clips. No, P-clips. Nice little button. Some big chunky fuses. More of these for running cables out of boxes and stuff. Some chokes for LED lights. And lots of nuts and bolts. I was very lucky actually when I came to work on the Genko Archer Pinball, which is American and made in Chicago during the 30s, during the Al Capone mob rule, which I'm still working on, pretty well near finished now. We'll be coming to that in the spring. But because it is American, the threads are different, very different. But when I moved into my father's house, my sister very kindly gave it to me effectively in my father's shed. And I don't think my dad kept junk. He thought about what he was keeping in his defence. And my sister and my brother-in-law said, "Oh, you can throw all that out." I said, "No, I don't think I'll do that just yet," because I thought I'll come to it in the fullness of time. And I have to say, some of the stuff I skipped, I look back on now and think, I don't know if I should have done that. But anything like that, screws and bolts, I kept them. And he had American threads, not only the nuts, the bolts and everything, for not for a Genko Archer, but they were the right ones. So there you go. I just thought we'd go through a little bit of junk for those that get excited by it. It's probably only me, isn't it? Moving on. Actually, just before we leave the subject of Chinese diesel heaters, by the way, this is my spare one, because they're so ridiculously cheap, you might as well have two. That's the one that's running, and if I need to service it, just swap it with a spare, and you know, it just works for me. And there's the power supply. But what I was going to say is, because the question comes up a lot on forums and people get hit quite heavily when they ask the question, is, will it run on old engine oil? No, it won't. Yeah, you can feed it through and it'll fire up, but it won't last long. The burn chamber just completely clogs up. And anybody who says, "Oh, it's no problem, I run it through all the time," they're talking rubbish. It will not run on old engine oil as it is. You've got to filter it, and even then it's not a nice fuel. I mean, diesel, kerosene, is cheap enough, and these are just merely sipping fuel. Don't put that kind of stuff through it. It's the same with veg oil, and I've seen people, well, I tried in the original, when I first got the heater, tried mixing it with veg oil, clogged up the heater. Don't do it. Just don't bother. You're not going to save any money. Back on the Genko Pinball, and it's been a while. I tended to work on this in the summer months, but we're actually into spring, and I thought, well, I'll give it a go. And if you remember rightly, if you have been following it, there's a missing score ratchet wheel inside the machine. Can't buy them, nobody makes them, too long ago, 1937, 38. But my friend Roger Ball in the extremities of Essex in England, I sent him some copper discs which were 50mm in diameter, and he marked them out with the correct spacing for me, so I've got something to work to actually make the teeth. But I'll show you how we're doing. I've got some burrs to take off the back, but if you look, and I'm doing it with this. Yeah, so I think we'll progress with it. And he also made the bush for it, which I can't remember now. I think he is phosphor bronze or brass. I think it was brass, and it's interference fit. But what happens is I've got that once I've cut all the teeth on it, I shall refit that. I shall solder, or rather braze, this back so it's a good tight fit. And I've got two brass tubes. I've got to drill holes for them, fit those in, and then they've got little pins and springs. The original wheel on the Genko, and most of the Genkos, was steel and copper coated. And you could rightfully say, well, why would you choose copper as a softer metal? Well, it's actually very difficult to work copper. But having said that, there isn't a great deal of pressure on this thing as a ratchet. So, you know, it'll last donkey's years, to be honest, before I have to worry about that again. I gather, and a couple of people have told me this, well, if you just take those to somebody who does CNC, they'll make you some. And I thought, well, yeah, but they want to make 30 odd, and I'm not gonna find a market for 30 Genko ratchet wheels. So that's kind of where we are with that. So I shall continue with that until we've got all the way around, and then we can start looking at assembling it. But anyway, I'm very grateful to Roger for marking it out, because it had to have the precise number of teeth on the outside, but he's marked it all out for me. He did complain, actually, because he said, anybody who's worked with copper will know this, it jams everything up. But having said that, I think it's come out quite well. I think the subject of batteries has come up before on Ralph's house. I use this extensively at work, actually. It's just a little mains tester, so if you get near anything that's live, it'll bleep at you, which is important when you're working on electrics, and I do from time to time. I work on electrics at work, and of course around the house, and in fact, this featured very early on in Ralph's house when I was rewiring the whole place. And if you go back to some of those early videos when I first moved in here with my girlfriend at the time, I looked under the stairs and there was an old Bakelite Wilex fuse box, and I said, watch this, I'll just turn the power off and cut every cable that came out of it. And she said, why are you doing that? I said, because now I've got to rewire it. Forced my hand. Anyway, I don't know, was it 4 or 5 years I've been here now? But the battery on this, amazingly, is still going. Now, it's hard to believe, isn't it? But this thing's pretty good, because if you do leave it on, after a few seconds, it shuts itself off. But in the back of it, we've got a PP3, the elusive 9-volt battery. And I don't know if you've seen the price of these days, but these aren't cheap, And I wouldn't recommend that you buy Duracell. They are known for leaking. They're probably the worst battery you could buy, I should think, nowadays. And they're not cheap, So a couple of Duracell batteries in 9-volt was about £6.50, cheapest on eBay anyway. I don't know what they'd be locally, probably more. They do vary a lot. You can buy packs of 9-volt batteries, sort of low-grade batteries, for about £13–14 for 10 batteries, something like that. So just over £1 each. But like all batteries, over time they do expire, don't they? And so I thought, well, why don't I get into a rechargeable 9-volt batteries, and then I'm going to buy them again. So there isn't that much in the cost, really. So £6.50 for 2 Duracell batteries, or you can buy lithium batteries, which have got a longer lifespan, but not necessarily rechargeable, and they were about £9 each. They're the Energizer ones, I think. So I thought, I think the last time I bought a PP3 battery, it was about 75 pence or less. Not now. So anyway, I bought some of these rechargeable 9-volt ones. They are actually, I've had to unplug them just for this video, but they actually are still under charge, because I thought these would be great, because I've got a couple of 9-volt smoke detectors, and I have got some that use AAs, but they don't seem to last very long at all. So I thought, right, well, switch over to the 9-volt type, and I shall use rechargeables. Hopefully they'll run on rechargeables, they should do. Batteries have been the bane of my life. I'll tell you for why. Right, I'm just going to put something up on the bench. And it's this. If you can see it, it's a Hacker radio. And believe you and me, this is one of the best sounding radios you can buy. And I'm grateful to Graham from the YouTube Radio Cruncher channel. I try and watch every Sunday. Mostly he repairs radios, but I find rather like watching Shango 66 in the States. He repairs old cathode ray tube TVs, before we got all this LCD stuff. And but I like the mythology, is it? Yeah. Well, I like his technique in tracing, methodology, sorry. His technique in tracing down faults, and it's very much the same for Graham. It's quite useful to watch. You do learn quite a bit. But these do sound amazing. I don't know if I can tune this in.
For the war criminals bit, and the Tories got furious because they wanted to...
Just such a... I'm not going to leave it on too long because I'll get a copyright strike. Absolutely wonderful sound. Padded radio, made in the, well, throughout the, I think from the 50s right through to the 70s. This is one of the later ones. And so you've got long wave, medium wave. I'll tell you, medium wave is getting quieter and quieter. And I think one of the reasons for that, well, there are two reasons really. There are less people listening to radio. That's just a fact. And coming from somebody that works on radio sporadically, but I have done over 30 odd years. Incidentally, if you've not heard my Mavis the Tea Lady channel, I'll put a link. Well, I'll put a link down here. Go and have a listen to that. It's a sort of sideline of what I've been doing on radio, but I like the medium of radio. And I created this character called Mavis the Tea Lady, who comes into the studio with the worst food you could ever imagine. Anyway, so if you want to have a listen to that, the link's below. But yeah, as I say, people generally aren't listening to radio now, and everything's so instant. People don't have the time. And radio, even by the 1980s, had reached the stage where the only time people really listen to it was when they're going to and from work. They just don't bother with it anymore. It's just a fact of life. But I do have a lot of radios, as you can see. I've got all the traditional shortwave sets, that type of stuff. And I've even got these SDR radios, which I absolutely love because they're so compact and really nice to use, quite frankly. They use, rather than rotary potentiometers, they use these click stop type ones. I like those. Yeah, so the SDR radios are pretty good, but batteries, especially on portable stuff, is a bit of a problem, you know. If I spin this round, and anybody who's seen a hacky radio will know all this, but we'll drop the back down. They use these, I think they're PP9s, I think that's the proper name of these, but they're about £5 each. Ridiculous. So what I did with these, in fact I'm going to peel the tape off and show you. Incidentally, if you can't get connectors like that, what I suggest you do is get a used one of these and cut round the top, and then you've got yourself a new connector because you just flip it over. But yeah, I'll take this up, and this is how I did it rather than have to keep buying batteries all the time. I can take this up again afterwards. There is a guy on eBay that sells rechargeable versions of these, but I would imagine they're filled with the same thing, but they've got a charging circuit in them. If I leave the top off, what I've actually done is put 6 AA rechargeable batteries in it, which I, you know, when they get flat, I should take them out and put them in my rechargeable charger, and they're just soldered onto the connections underneath. Work very well, and it means I don't ever have to buy one of those again, unless I need to make one of those connectors up. Yeah, so I'll just set that aside for a minute. I shall put the connections on that a little later on. But yeah, I think these are a good idea, these 9-volt batteries. So it saves you buying them again. I take the milliamp hour rating with some skepticism. Anything you buy from China in lithium batteries, they always overstate them. So I don't know, they're probably 200 or 300 milliamp hour, but they'll be fine for a smoke detector anyway. But it's quite nice. It comes with this little lead. 2 USB-C plugs on the end. Just plug them in, see the socket on the bottom to charge them up. And you wouldn't have to buy any of those for a considerable amount of years, would you? Yeah, so what else has been going on? Well, if we reflect back a bit, I was still working on the Genko Archer pinball, 1937, 38 pinballs, around that time. And I had to ask my son how much I paid for that, but I think it was about it was either 300 or 380, and it didn't work. It needed quite a bit of work, but you know, I've moved on considerably. And but people email me from time to time and say, well, what's happened to your Genko Archer, or what's happened to your Gun to Wolf Bingo Let? Well, I do have lots of other things to do in life. If I'd got nothing else to do, I could just do that week in, week out, and everybody would be sitting on their seats, wouldn't they? But life doesn't work like that. So, and sometimes you get held up with things. And I have to return to them. I've also got a fruit machine that I need to return to as well. But interestingly, someone in the week offered one to me for sale, and words failed me. He put a price on it of 2,500, which I think is really pushing the limits, because these are pinballs that have no flippers at the bottom. It was before they came in. They didn't really come in until about the 60s, 70s, you know, pinballs with flippers. So they've got a limited market, and I would say that the pinball that he was offering, I'll say another Genko Archer, they don't come up very often, was actually not even in as good a condition as mine, especially the playfield, and some things weren't right on that playfield. So I think really, you know, the max you could get for that is probably about 600, but not 2,500 as it is. If you've got everything right on it and it's all cleaned up, yeah, probably, because there aren't many of them around, are there? But interesting, isn't it, that, you know, the value people place on these things. And a lot of these old penny amusement arcade machines exist, but they're now in private collections, or I think there's one in Great Yarmouth. Anyway, thank you for watching this week, and next week, or at least part of it, we're going to be talking about this, the 1966 Batmobile. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe.